Good evening and welcome to another episode of Thursday Night Deck Building. I'm Kaiser and today we are looking at one of the most useless skills in the game, if not the most useless thing. It's the Barbering skill. As you know, the Barbering skill appears infamously on Mod the Barber as his only skill, and it was then followed by the Barber pole, which simply plays on table and does nothing else, and Mod's advice to give a personal the skill of barbering. But there is no card in the game that actually asks for that skill. So what can you do with it? Well, believe it or not, there are actually tournament-winning decks that are built around this skill. The one time when it actually won a big event was in 2017 at British Nationals. Moog, Son of Worf, ran a Vulcan deck using the pre-nerf Vulcan Mind Meld, and I think also the Serenites, to generate lots of barbering and then abuse it. But how can you abuse it? This is where In for a Trim comes in. Released late in the game, in All Good Things, it sees or plays on table. It makes Barber Pole and Mod's Advice play for free, so that's good. But what is really interesting here is that once each turn, if you have Barber Pole in play, you may peek at the top X cards of opponent's draw deck, where X is the number of your barbering personal in play. Doesn't work with Borg. You may discard any events, incidents, or interrupts, then replace the rest in any order. So this can potentially be extremely powerful. We get to do different things. We may look at the top cards of our opponent's deck, and this serves several purposes. For one, it gives us information, what our opponent has got in their deck, what cards we need to prepare for, what we can expect, and we also get to discard a lot of cards. We can discard events, incidents, and interrupts. Events can already be very powerful. Just think of the many decks that use, for example, Kiva's Farge Collector, or some of the other cards that work similarly, like the card that lets you draw cards in continuing mission decks. Let's see what's out there. You can simply discard them. Or all those decks that use Handshake as the primary draw engine. It's an incident. You can also discard it. And there can be various interrupts that might be annoying. Cards that cancel your events. Queen and so on. Cards that help your opponent cycle through the deck. Mutation. You can discard all of those. And in addition, the remaining cards you can then replace in any order. And this is where it really becomes interesting. What you can do, and what we're trying to do in our deck here, is try and hide a certain skill as deep down the deck of our opponent as possible. We're going, for example, for security dilemmas in this deck, and we're trying to trim as much as possible from our opponent's deck, and whatever we can rearrange, we try and get the security cards low down, so they will have to draw through other cards first, and the beauty is we can repeat this. Now, of course, this doesn't work with only one barbering in play, so it gets more powerful the more barbering we actually have. So, apart from Mod the Barber, there is only one virtual card, Vomor, the Vulcan Barber here. But interesting enough, we aren't running any of these cards because all our barbering comes from people who are self-taught or who have learned it at Barbering University. And for that, we'll have a look at our deck here. Now, in order to make this deck at least a little bit competitive, I'm basing this around the TOS Federation deck that I've showcased in episode 3. It's a very solid deck. It has won American Continentals. It has beaten one of the top players in this year's World Championship track event, not played by me, but by somebody who saw the deck on this channel here. So the core of this deck is a really, really good solver. I've changed it around a little bit, but the structure stays the same. But we are going to use some of the tools that it provides in order to power our barbering engine. So bear with me as we walk through the setup here. TOS Federation plays with a alternate universe door and the Q's tent. We have 3 planets, reallocate dividends, review mining operation, and Investigate Quarantine, and 3 space missions, Repair Mission, Explore Dyson Sphere, Seek Remnants. We can do a 2-mission win if we draw the right cards, but the personnel are good enough that you can also do 3 missions and win the game, especially with the support of the Barbering engine. We need a couple of seed cards. Preserver Obelisk is the new Assign Mission Specialists. This grabs us 2 personnel, Giotto and Vanderberg. Giotto immediately downloads the Classic Communicator, which will be useful later on. Then we'll have Defend Homeworld, which is hidden for the moment, as is Taking Charge. We have In for a Trim as our central barbering engine. 5-year mission, which draws us a card. Risk is Our Business, which also draws us a card and does some other things as well. And To Boldly Go, which increases the range and shields of our ships. This is a card that you could cut if you want to make room for more dilemmas. You could also cut the space door, but it just makes it a lot more reliable if you have access to ships all the time. That leaves us with room for 16 dilemmas, because we are also running General Order 7 here, which is very important to the setup, as I'll explain in a minute. And we are also using the book. That's the only book that Barbering University actually has at its library, but it's a good one. So, let's just shuffle our deck, see what we get. Okay, so not looking too bad here. We find a Barber Pole, so we have to start with that. Barber Pole plays for free. So let's play Barber Pole. Then we get to play 2 TOS era personnel for free. Luckily enough, we have a captain in hand, so we don't need to waste a download on that. So we play Captain Kirk as 1 free play. And why don't we play his Nemesis Khan as our 2nd free play? And then we can use the text on the Final Frontier to download a ship instead of our card play once per game. So let's open our deck. And let's find the Starship Enterprise. Wherever it's hiding, there it is. Right, so we've got a captain, we've got personnel that can staff the ship, we've got a classic communicator, so we'll beam them all up. We fly to review mining operation. There is some information about how you should seed your missions and where you should put your outpost in the deck notes. Some of it is repeated from episode 3, but I've put the full transcript in the description, so follow the link that will take you to TrackCC, where you have the turn-by-turn or phase-by-phase explanations of how to run this deck most efficiently. We fly to review mining operations. We flip Taking Charge. Captain Kirk is a captain, so he can use Taking Charge to download an objective there. That is going to be the beloved Process or Mining, which does 2 things. It allows us to cycle through our deck, and it scores points. If played at this mission, it actually scores double points, so there can be 2 points per turn. To do this, we need 1 geology or 2 geology personnel there. And we have started with one of them, Vanderberg, so we immediately beam him down to run Process or Mining. And then we can more or less end our turn. If we had any copies of Mod's Advice in play, we would also play them for free at this point. But we don't, so we can't do that for the moment. We have to end our turn with a staff chip in orbit of a 23rd century mission in order to trigger an extra card draw from Risk is Our Business. We'll also get a card draw from To Boldly Go and our regular end of turn card draw, giving us 3 card draws. We are going to draw 2 cards and 1 card draw will be converted into the download to hand of a Christopher Pike related personal, as allowed by General Order 7. So we'll draw 1 card, 2 cards, and we would convert our download to a download to hand of Vina. Now we've already drawn her, so we can grab a different Christopher Pike related personal. For example, we could go for Yeoman Colt. This would be a way to get a second geology personal very early on. So she goes to hand. We end our turn. During our opponent's turn, we could use the Starship Enterprise to download a personal. If we haven't got a second geology in hand, we could do it now. If you don't find a captain in your opening hand, like Captain Kirk here, that you need for taking charge, you could also use it immediately on turn 1 to download a captain. There are 3 captains in the deck: Captain Kirk, Christopher Pike, and also Yeoman Rand, who is a captain of some sports team, I believe. But that's enough for taking charge. She only carries that she is a captain, not the captain of a starship. Again, these details are in the deck notes. So, we could download somebody during our opponent's turn. If we have the download of the Enterprise still available, that's very useful during mission attempts. So we'll keep it that way for the moment. And we start our second turn. We start with Processor Mining. We may discard a card from hand. Of course, we get rid of the extra Barber Pole. We only need 1. We discard that. We put the bottom card from our discard pile out of game. Score a point for that. And draw a card. So this is a good way to cycle through the various copies of Barber Pole that we have. We need 1 copy in play, but any excess copies we are simply turning into something better with Processor Mining. Alright, then we have our 2 free plays. One of them will be Vina, or Barbarella as she will be known in this deck. And then we'll play a second geology, and then we can card play a personal, for example, Joaquin. And now we can start setting up our little barbershop here. We'll flip Defend Homeworld in our orders phase, discard it to grab one of the people who want to learn barbering. And it is none other than Excalion Kalis. And we could already start attempting missions. We try and do the setup as efficient as possible, so we'll beam down a second geology personal in order to draw even more cards next time. Vina we usually want to keep safe, because she is going to run the barbershop. Excalion Kalis is one of her disciples, so let's keep him safe as well. And the others are more or less free to attempt missions, so let's fly them over to here. Kirk uses Taking Charge again to download Prepare Landing Party. This can simply score you 5 bonus points if you fulfill the conditions, and it also allows you to download a security personnel. There are notes in the description how you can use this most efficiently. And then we could immediately attempt this mission here. We are not going to bother with that. We can also simply leave 2 personnel aboard to trigger the extra card draw from Risk is Our Business and end our turn. And now we pretty much have all the personnel we need out. With General Order 7, we can download to hand instead of a card draw a Christopher Pike related personnel, and they pretty much cover all the skill bases. You can find security that way, you can find engineer that way, so you can find science that way. It's a very useful card. In this case, we have all the guys we really need to have in play out already, so we are not going to bother with that. We're hoping to draw into copies of Mod's advice now. So let's draw 3 cards to end. And we haven't found one. So at the beginning of our next turn, we would then use the process or mining to discard a card. We could, for example, discard a copy of Jose Tyler because he's there in multiples. Discard him. Put the bottom non-ref card out of game to score a point. Actually score 2 points because it's doubled here. And then draw 2 cards because we've got 2 geologists. And we still haven't found a Mod's advice. But still, at the start of this turn, we can do something else. We can start running our barbershop. Vina, at the start of the turn, gains any skill of her choice. She gains Barbering. In our orders phase, once we have played a couple of cards, for example, Zulu and the Keeper and the Alice series, Excaving Kellis can gain a skill from a personal present until the end of turn. So he learns Barbering from Barbarella herself. And we also have the communicator that we downloaded. So somebody can join the fun. For example, down there where we've set up our barbershop, Vanderberg decides that he wants to learn Barbering too. He copies Barbering from a TOS icon personal with the classic communicator, so that already gives us 3 Barbering. And then we could use In for a Trim, reveal the top 3 cards of our opponent's deck, discard any of the verbs that we think might be useful for our opponent, and most of them will be, otherwise they wouldn't be in the deck. And then we start putting security as deep down the deck as we can. And on our next couple of turns, we are going to escalate this. At the end of this turn, we're going to draw 3 more cards. There already we have a Mod's advice. To get some cards out of our deck, we could play a Going to the Top to download a double leadership personal. Let's not do this for now. And at the start of next turn, we would discard a Barber Pole, remove it from game to score 2 points, already up to 6 now, draw 2 more, and now we have a couple of Mod's advice there. So we would play one on Yeoman Colt, who isn't a barber yet. We could play a Mod's advice, again this plays for free, on this android here, who doesn't need a barbering android. So that would already give us 5. So we can look at more cards of our opponent's deck, discard a lot of stuff, put the securities on the bottom. And by now we will be attempting this mission. Hopefully we don't run into a dead end, because what we really want to do here is find the big book of barbering at this wonderful planet here at Taylor's 4. Forbidden knowledge about how to cut people's hair. When we acquire this, your non-aligned personnel gain the named skill and affiliation. So we would name Federation to make all our non-aligned guys become Federation and gain Barbering. So the Keeper is a barber. Khan is a barber. His henchman is a barber. And all the other non-aligneds who aren't barbers yet will also become barbers. So potentially we can generate 10, 12, maybe 15 barbering personnel in this deck. And then that already gives us access to a huge chunk of our opponent's deck. Discard anything that might be useful as far as verbs are concerned. It doesn't work for objectives, but events, interrupts, and incidents, non-Borg cards, of course, are fair game. And then we'll just put the security on the bottom. So as you can see, we have 2 Mod's advice there, and we are about 40% through our deck. If we draw a couple more cards, you see that sometimes they are clocked together, but there should be more copies coming up. This is just a very bad shuffle here. We have 3 of our Mod's advices on the in the bottom 5 cards of our deck, so that's not an ideal shuffle, but games like that happen too. That's why the book is also there to make you gain more instances of barbering. So Of course, if your opponent is running a deck that doesn't rely on events and interrupts and mostly plays personal, then this doesn't affect them as much because you can't cripple their draw engines that way. Decks that like this one use seeded draw engines are likewise a bit better set up to play against this, but still that means you have access to more personal, and then just try it out yourself. Reveal the top 10 cards of any deck you have and have a look at how many security you have, and then just put them down. So the next 3, 4, 5 cards will be non-security personal, and for next turn your opponent does it again. So you might end up having a very hard time finding more security personnel. And of course, the ones they get into play before we set up our barber shop, those we need to eliminate. So let's have a look at a potential dilemma setup here. We are going to dead end one mission. Could also see the whale probe to save the mission for another turn. But really, we are trying to shut a lot of missions with security. Berserk Changeling, while it also has other requirements, 3 security is by far the one that is used most often to get through. Ferengi Infestation also requires multiple security and cunning here. And we can then use different cards like Misinterpreted History or Rules of Obedience. These cards give us a limited choice of which personal we want to kill. So we can either go for somebody they need to get through the wall part of these dilemmas, or we can just go for security outright and go for pure attrition. M113 creature does the same thing. We can target security personnel with it. And with Ankari Spirits at a space mission, we can also try and kill personnel. This works nicely after Rules of Obedience. If they get through Rules of Obedience with 2 security and 2 treachery, we have some nice targets that have security for Ankari Spirits, and then hope that we get at least one so they won't get through the Ferengi Infestation. At planets, you can also use Imminent Disintegration Protocol, because at planets it simply kills 1 security, and to get past it requires 2 more security or 6 universal personnel. It's a rather good one. Don't sleep on that one. It has seen a lot of play. It's certainly a very good dilemma. For space, it does the same for engineers, so you could potentially also use the same setup, going for engineers with females love interest and garbage cows and things like that. And there is also Quantum Leap in there as a float dilemma. It also requires security and 2 archaeology, which can be a big problem for several decks. There are some dilemma combinations, or a full set of dilemma combinations that you could run with this setup. But of course, if you think that in your meta security is a very common skill, you can go for engineer dilemmas, you can go for a science setup, you can go for diplomacy. And if you are me, then it usually fails because your opponent is bringing the exact same thing that shatters all your dreams immediately. So it's by no means guaranteed that you're going to win a lot of games with this deck, but it's based on a very solid solver side. The Barbering cards don't clog your deck too much. You can play them for free if you draw them, or you can cycle them away if they are not helpful to you. And you're then left with just a very smoothly running Federation solver that has some potentially I'm not going to say broken, but very, very powerful abilities that help you to get through dilemmas. Again, I'll refer to you to episode 3, where you'll have a rundown of some of the most useful Federation TOS cheaters and what you can do with them. So if you look at the database, you'll see that there have been several attempts to make In for a Trim work, also ones around the book. But I think the only big win tournament win was the Vulcan deck that won nationals in the UK in 2017. But that deck is not playable in that form because several cards have received errata in the meantime. So this would be my attempt to do something with Barbering and hopefully have fun with it. Even if you don't win all the games, you might be able to at least have a good time with your opponent, and that's the most important thing after all. All right, if you have any comments, I'd appreciate it. And if you like this content at all, subscribe to this channel and tune in next time. Until then, expend your power in the universe, get a haircut, and bye-bye.